Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of Project Transitions Transition Points. I'm here with my sometime co-host, Stephanie Payne. How's it going, Stephanie?
Hi, Brandon.
We have a really awesome guest today from North Carolina.
Yes, we do. We have with us Dr. Douglas Engelman, visiting assisting professor in sociology at UNCW, also president of NAMI Wilmington, and author of A Boy Broken. Hello,
Good morning,
Douglas.
you
How are
guys.
you?
Good morning. How you doing?
Good. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about doing this with you all. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's completely our pleasure.
Yes, definitely glad to have you here with us. This is actually not the first podcast we've done together. You had me on with Stacy, and I don't want to butcher her last name. I remember Stacy. What's her last name?
Her name is Stacy Colomer, and she's my friend and colleague in our podcast. She is the director of the School of Social Work at UNCW, and we work together on the podcast and a couple other projects we're developing. And I can say the name of my podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I won't make you say it. Who isn't fucking crazy?
I love that title.
So relatable.
I love that title.
Yes.
I had such a blast with the two of you guys. I hope it's the first of a few or many more conversations.
Do you mind if I talk just a minute about the podcast and where it comes from? And
please.
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do in many different ways in the pursuit of my career and my activities with NAMI and the whole mental health field is to try to what I call normalize, and I think I said this to you in our podcast with you, Stephanie, normalize the idea of mental health problems, mental disorders, mental illness, whatever you want to call it, that there are so many people who are dealing with mental health problems, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse over the years, especially since the pandemic, that we're really, making the case that everybody is touched by mental health problems. I'm not saying that everybody is fucking crazy, but that's the idea we're trying to promote. It's just such a ubiquitous presence in society that it should be normalized to the point where we can reduce the stigma. And that's really ultimately what we're trying to do. So that was where that name came from. Let's just all share this together, this experience together, and stop the stigma. That's what our really what our main purpose is. And as you know, with NAMI, that's a big part of what we're doing is just trying to reduce the stigma.
I love it.
Everybody feels comfortable saying, yeah, I'm screwed up. My brother is screwed up. My parents are screwed up. Everybody is. We're dealing with a very stressful social situation here, and with capitalism and all the impulses that creates. The needs for jobs, the need for wealth, the need for progress, and in all its different forms. And so, all these stresses give us all a difficult experience, and so we're all in this together. And why should this all be stigmatized, right? So that's
absolutely.
I love it.
That's my little let's reduce stigma speech. So
I love it. I am 100% on board, and you kind of already hit the nail on the head with one of the first kind of talking points I wanted to dive into today. Was I wanted to kind of ask you to share with us what your inspiration is for a lot of these things that you're involved in. And one of those things was the podcast. And I think, reducing stigma is huge and very important. And like you said, since the pandemic, we've definitely been hit with an awareness, which is, it's a beautiful thing, really, when you think of, in terms of progress and like, hey, let's tackle this, let's talk about it, which is what we're doing now. And that's a beautiful thing.
So
go ahead.
To kind of answer that question, sorry to jump on you like that, answer that question about the focus on the family and, what was my motivation, the initiative. So as I chronicle in my book, A Boy Broken, the boy is my son, Doug Jr., who was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 20. This is in 1992, so this goes back a long way. And at that time, mental illness was even more stigmatized than it is now. Less awareness, less understanding, less patience, and you're asking kind of why am I focusing on the family? Because as a parent, this is very much preceding my involvement with NAMI, my involvement with obviously the mental health field in any way, academically or as a volunteer at NAMI. I had no idea about anything having to do with mental health other than what I talk about in my book is that my father's brother, my uncle, had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. So we thought it was in the family somehow, but I just didn't know anything about it. And it was extremely stigmatized. And what I did, and I have to acknowledge it, is I hid it from my family. I hid it from my friends, our neighbors. I didn't want anybody to know that my son was schizophrenic. And so I think about that all the time. This is 30 years later, and I still feel guilty about it. I still feel I did my son a disservice by, not letting people know about him, kind of hiding his life from my friends. And I feel bad about that. And that's one of the reasons I focus on the family, because I know from my own experience and from many, many other accounts of these experiences, that if the family doesn't engage in supporting the individual with a serious, even a mild form of mental illness, but a serious mental illness, then that person has a much, much lower potential for recovery, for getting back to what one might think of as at least a normal and productive life. If the family doesn't support them, they have a much, much more challenging road ahead. So my focus, when you think about when I decided to go back to school and ultimately get my PhD in sociology, I think of all the potential areas that you could look at in terms of research or being active in a certain area of the field. And I just felt like, because my experience was so ingrained as a family member, as a parent, as understanding what close family members are going through, as I'm sure both of you guys do, I felt like that's what I wanted to focus on. If you have to pick something, you can't focus on everything. So you got to pick something. So I decided to focus on the family, and that's my pursuit. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. It really does. Would you, and spark several more naturally.
Of course.
I mean, I'm sure with all the work that you do from a sociology standpoint, something I've personally learned in relation to my parents, and wondering, well, why the hell did they keep this hidden? What the heck? Like, they were doing the absolute best they could with the tools they had, and it's just a product of but we get to be kind of on the forefront of this change, which is a really beautiful thing. And you're doing such a fantastic job just diving into it, between the podcast and NAMI, and I'm grateful to be a part of this. But you said a couple of really interesting things. One, which was back in 1992, there was that not only the overall stigma, but also a lack of patience, which I thought was an interesting thing. I hadn't really had a perspective on until I myself became in this field. Because it does require a ton of patience. But what I want to ask you is what do you feel like you were able to lean on, or what supports did you have as a parent while you're going through that journey with your son, trying to find him whether you were trying to find him the appropriate treatment, or, get him the help he needed, what that looked like? Did you feel like you even had any?
As I mentioned to you, your project transition reminds me of the facility that my son wound up getting into pretty quickly. So he was diagnosed. He was living in Pittsburgh. This is a little bit of background that's kind of important. He was living in Pittsburgh with his mother. We were divorced. I was remarried. Two small children living in Naperville, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. And when he was diagnosed in Pittsburgh, he had an event in visiting us, and then he went back home and had a few more events, almost got arrested. His mother had him committed for a 30-day evaluation, and out of that, he was diagnosed. She was dealing with depression on her own, so she said, Doug, you got to take care of Dougie, and it's up to you. I can't deal with it. So she brought him to Chicago, and then here I was, like, I had no idea what to do, who to go to. The policeman who had, in the event that happened in our home prior to all this, when he was sent back here, sent back to us. I know this is a little complicated, but if you read the book, you'll know the whole story. Anyway, he was a policeman had come by. He was with my daughter, his sister, and had a psychotic break, and she called the police. And he told me to take him to Loyola Medical Center, which was a big hospital near where she lived. And that's the lucky thing. So this is my point. I was lucky. I took him to Loyola. They accepted him. Happened to be in a different county that I lived in that did not have the resources that they found for him. That was just, they found a facility called Madden. I think it was Madden. I can't remember the name of it, but and it's still existing. And they sent him there. So I had nothing to. So I had no input into that. I just was like, okay, he's going to this place called Madden. What's that all about? Well, it's very much like what you guys have with Project Transition. So we were so lucky to find a facility like that, over 30 years ago. And he was taken to Madden. He stayed there for, whether it was in the individual, the group housing, and then individual, and so on, different housing configurations. He got therapy. He had a psychiatrist. He had all of that, and I had nothing to do with it. I was just lucky. That's my point. If it hadn't been for him, that recommendation from the policeman to take him to Loyola, I wouldn't have known where to take him. I wouldn't have known what to do. So my answer was, I don't know. I was just lucky. And the point that I derive from that is, we don't want to have people in situations where they're just lucky, where it's a crapshoot. So that's why I joined NAMI. And I didn't even know about NAMI at the time. I learned about NAMI after my son passed away 8 years later. And I was dealing with grief and everything, and heavily involved in my church. And through my church, I found out about NAMI, and that's when I started volunteering for them. And that's where the history with NAMI begins. But that's not until almost 10 years after this diagnosis in 92. So, it's just what I want to do now in my career, the time I have to devote to this, is make sure as many people as possible know about NAMI, know about this touch point where they can find resources like you guys, and like other facilities, other clinical facilities, other providers that we can connect them to. Because if you don't have that, people just don't know what to do, and it's terrifying. And I also want to touch on this idea of, why are we hiding? What's the stigma about? And I think, Stephanie, you mentioned your parents, and I know what I did with my son Doug. And I write about this in my book. As a sociologist, we recognize the impulses of a system that favors or honors or enables people to succeed who are more educated, more quote unquote normal, right? And so when you have somebody like my son who, and I say this in the book, okay, I realize, okay, he's got schizophrenia. He's never going to be normal. He's never going to be able to have a good job. So now I'm thinking about my friends and their kids who are going to college, and they're going to be quote unquote successful, and he's not going to be successful. So what do I do with that? And the society is kind of imposing this paradigm on us that we want our children to be successful. We want to make sure we do everything we can to make sure they're successful, that they can go on and have a good house, a good job, a nice house, nice cars, and all the rest of that. Well, that's our system is imposing that on us. We're kind of a victim as a society of this paradigm that's been created. And
Oh, wow. Yeah.
so as a sociologist, it all goes back to capitalism. And of course, I get a lot of, pushback from that. Well, what's wrong with capitalism? Well, there's nothing wrong with capitalism. Here I am talking about, we're talking about mental health and mental illness. And I always wind up talking about what does capitalism provide us? It provides us with innovation and medical technology and other technologies and pharmaceuticals and all that, but it also provides a motivation for not wanting to be, mentally ill because we're not going to be successful. You see how that loop completely closes? It's a vicious cycle. And so the good things about capitalism are there, yeah, but also we need to recognize it. Let's pull away from this idea that, hey, if our kids aren't going to be financially successful, if they're not going to, be able to join the country club or whatever, those kinds of things, or get a nice house in a gated community or whatever, those are what our aspirations are. And if our kids are not going to be able to achieve that because they're mentally disordered, or they're unable to cope, or whatever the reason is, then they're not going to be. We want to hide that from our friends, and that's where the stigma comes from.
Yeah.
And that's the message I want to keep getting out to people is, let's normalize to say everybody is having problems. Everybody doesn't have to be successful and go to the best colleges and whatever we talk about success. Everybody doesn't have to be at the same level. We can be happy and satisfied as a society and not require this of our children. And that's really what I want to focus on with family. Oh, that was a real rant. I know that.
No, it was perfect. It was perfect.
That's a beautiful rant. A beautiful rant. I mean, again, all on board, just redefining what is success, what is normal as a whole, and looking at it from a bigger picture, because that's what we have to do when you have big numbers, which we do. We have a very high number of individuals struggling with serious mental illness right now. So you have to look at it from that perspective.
So it's such a complicated challenge. And that's why I'm so glad I got into sociology, because I think it helps me understand not only, the both ends of that spectrum of, wanting to be successful, what's causing the problems, what's causing the stress of our society. And here I am, I'm teaching students, right? I have, at any given semester between 100 and 150 students I'm teaching, interacting with on a weekly basis. And I constantly hear over, I wish you guys could come and sit in the classroom. And Stephanie, I think I invited you.
Yes,
so here the students talk about how stressful all of this stuff is, the college experience, the social experience, the need to be cool, the need to be accepted, the need to be whatever. And, they're facing these stresses. Who's imposing those stresses on us? Those stresses on them. We are. Academically, we are. Socially, we are. The media is doing it. Social media, especially now. So, I think so many people think about, oh, this kid has, bipolar, or this kid has depression or whatever. Oh, that's on them. No, it's not on them. It's on all of us, because we're imposing this almost, I see it almost like a prison in some ways, confining them to a certain way of being. And if they're not that way, then they're not quote unquote normal, and then they're not accepted. And that's the stigma. Again, that's where it comes from. So we're all contributing to it. And that's that's the message I want to get out there. And, I'm not doing a very good job of it, but I'm working on it,
But as long as you're pushing the message, that's all that matters, though.
Yeah. Well, that's all I can. Yeah. I'm trying to do this in any way I can. That's where the podcast comes from, the book, doing stuff like this, just talking about it in any way that I can communicate with others about, and kind of making sure, at least my perspective, and I'm not saying I'm right about everything I'm saying, but I think I'm onto something when I talk about the complexities of how society imposes this paradigm on us, and it affects the way people react to it, not only from the standpoint of the individual who's feeling some kind of mental health struggle, but also how people view that struggle from the outside. And it's all one big spectrum,
Wow.
I feel like a big point of what I'm hearing is that societal pressure, and correct me if I'm not on target here, but societal pressure is a barrier to healing this mental health crisis.
So let me give you an example. This might kind of clarify or highlight what I'm talking about. So I teach a course called Sociology of Mental Disorder. You'll notice I changed the name of the course from mental illness to mental disorder, trying to move away from that idea of thinking about mental challenges as illnesses rather than,
I like that.
Out of ordered, so disorder is to me a better term. So I changed the name of the course to Sociology of Mental Disorder. So what I do is I have a textbook, and we go through kind of the history of quote unquote mental illness. We talk about going all the way back to the pre-millennia, first millennia, in terms of how mental illness has developed and being understood in society, all the way through to current day, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, and so on. So we give the students a background and an understanding of diagnoses, DSM, we talk about, and all that. So it's very academic from that standpoint. But what is also emerging in this course is, and this is the fourth semester I'm teaching it, this winds up being sort of a haven for students, because they feel like they can talk about the problems and the pressures. And this is where I'm hearing more and more and more. Every week we spend a full session just talking, the students just talking among themselves, and I'm just kind of sitting there listening and standing there and kind of maybe facilitating, but discussion about, this is why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, and this is what my therapist said, and this is the drug that I used to be on, and this is what I'm taking now, and talking about in such depth about their own experiences. And they all come away from it saying, wow, I didn't realize that I wasn't the only one. I hear this over and over.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Those open forum types of classes really, really drive home what you're trying to push. And those are 9 to 10 times the best classes you'll ever take.
And because the focus is mental health, mental disorder, then it is even more important. I mean, I have students who are literally dragging themselves out of bed who wouldn't go to another class, but they're going to go to this one because it helps them. It makes them fit. And I'm not putting myself out there as a therapist. I have no clinical experience at all, but it's just like, okay, you guys just start talking, and, I might interject something every once in a while, but it's really the students just, hanging on to each other basically, and saying, you guys are helping me. I have one student, he's going to be doing a podcast with us, who told me, he came up to me at the end of the semester, he said, Dr. Engelman, before I took this class, I would never even talk in class. By the end of the semester, he was talking not only about his own experiences, he's a film major, and he had produced a video of himself talking to himself about his problems. And he asked to show it in class. We did. He didn't want to be there because he didn't want to, be sitting in the room while they were seeing this video. I can send it to you guys if you want to see it.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
He's skateboarding around campus, and you just hear him talking about what he's thinking to himself. Okay. Now he said, I would never even talk in class. Not only would I, and let alone let somebody see this video. We showed it in class. The other students loved it, and his name is Aaron. They thought, Aaron, man, dude, that was awesome. And so it was so freeing for him to be able to feel comfortable talking and about himself and helping others too. So people these students in the class are just not only getting the help they need from students in helping them, but they're also able to extend themselves out to other people, which is so healthy. And so, so they come out of the class thinking, wait a minute, no, I'm fine, because, everybody else is experiencing the same stuff, so.
People just want to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big, and hopefully, go ahead.
More, I'm just going to say, we just need more and more forum like that, so that students can get together, talk about their stresses, talk about these experiences, and let each other know that they love each other, even despite whatever it is they're feeling, and that they accept each other. And it's really an awesome experience for me to be able to see this happen every semester. It's tremendous. Wow. And I'm hoping to get the class. So I'm able to teach it as a sociologist every semester. I'm also now collaborating with social work, the School of Social Work, in doing this as a cross-listed, is what they call it, interdisciplinary. And I'm hoping to get this class put into some of the other colleges, because I think students across the spectrum need this kind of experience.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, I didn't want to promote. I'm not promoting myself here. I hope. I'm just
no. I don't think we got that out of that at all. If anything, you were just pursuing to how great of an open forum is for people. So
the students.
Yeah.
It's all about the students. Yeah. So.
That societal pressure, really, that's, at that time when an individual is in school, you have, I would imagine that is the peak of societal pressure.
Yeah.
So
I think so. I think, but if a student doesn't gain a different perspective where, this performance mandate isn't as important as their own mental health, for example, or the mental health of their suite mates or their friends, or whatever the group that they're involved in, if they can kind of come away thinking, okay, I want to get a good education, I want to learn to be a critical thinker, I want to learn how to navigate in society, but I don't want it to be all about being quote unquote successful. If we can drive that message. But one of the problems I think I'm facing, and this is kind of going off of the mental health issue, but how does the university send two different messages? That we're not imposing on you the need to be high achieving academic students. If we don't want to impose on you, then how do we make ourselves a viable academic institution? Mm-hmm. It's like, you can't have it both ways. You can't soft pedal high academic achievement and at the same time be a highly achieving academic institution. So I don't know what the answer to it. Do you see what I'm saying? That what the problem is from a university standpoint, from an institutional standpoint? How do we do this effectively? How do we bring a better perspective to our students and what we really want for them, and still maintain ourselves as a high achieving academic institution? It's a tough problem for the administration.
Wow.
And this is one area I'm going to try to get into more and more is working with the higher levels of the administration and saying, what message are we sending to our students? What are we telling them at orientation when we're talking, and how do we, another problem this is another rant. How do we get all of our faculty to be more accepting of students who are having problems, who are struggling, who might not be able to go to class attend every class, who might not be able to get their assignment in on time? How do we get faculty to accept that and to work around? And this is another huge problem. Some faculty members, frankly, just, hey, if you can't cut it, you're out. That's all.
You can't utilize an open door policy if you're not going to use the open door policy.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what about the individuals that have, intellectual disabilities? Like, what makes their success? How are we prioritizing their success? Just because they, like you said, maybe they need extra time on assignments, or need more time to take a test, or can't attend every class.
So there's something called, I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, something called accommodations. So you go to the, I forget the name of the student organ or the student services, and you get accommodations for extra testing time or whatever. Well, faculty don't particularly appreciate more than one or two of those in each class. What if you had 15 or 20 students all coming up with a letter of accommodation, and the faculty member would be like, wait a minute, I can't deal with this, So there's got to be a different way of thinking about how we define success as an institution, how we define success as a student, how we grade, all of these things. How do we determine how well a student is doing, other than, well, they got a 95 or they got an 85 or they got a 75 on that exam or that quiz or that paper or whatever. There's got to be more nuance to it. There's got to be more thought given to it. And now we get into a whole nother problem. It's also a tangential problem to the mental health of students, which is, faculty, are they motivated? Are they incentivized to be really good teachers? Not really. Most of them who are tenure are looking for or incentivized to do research, because that's how the institution gets their money. So it's a big problem. I'm not going to solve this, but I do want to be someone who talks about these problems. I don't want to criticize, using the old phrase, bite the hand that feeds me, but I want to be able to talk to the hand that feeds me and say, feed me something else, please.
Well,
this is, go ahead.
Maybe the answer will be, more individuals like you creating space for people to go and share what they're going through and the struggles they're having, and realizing they're not alone, and it creating somewhat of a ripple that leads to a movement.
Yeah, I'm hoping, because it all big change. It all comes down to social movements. I'm glad you mentioned that, Stephanie. Nothing happens in our society without a real significant social movement, and there has to be something. And I'm not saying I'm the leader of a new social movement, but at least I'm trying to expose some of the areas that can be addressed in a social movement. And I think NAMI has the potential to be a social movement, if we can kind of focus it that way. Talking about NAMI and NAMI National and kind of what they're all about is another a whole nother podcast probably. So
let's do it. I say let's speak it into existence. You are president of NAMI Wilmington, so you are a leader. I say we just team up and manifest this thing. Let's manifest.
Okay, well, I'm down with that. I'm definitely down with that. I'm only the president for, this is my third month. I've chaired one monthly meeting so far. I'm definitely learning the ropes. Chuck Eldridge, who I know Chuck,
yes,
who is now our former president, is now our executive director, is really leading me by the hand and helping me figure things out. But I think I have the platform now because of my position in the university and combined with this board presidency, I now have the platform to maybe have a voice that can speak beyond Wilmington even at some point, and maybe, you know, NAMI North Carolina, NAMI National. We'll see where it goes. I'm taking every step I can, little by little, and just see where it leads me. You know, we'll figure, you know, see what happens.
You are in the best possible position to make that movement to break the stigma. So,
well, that's what I appreciate you saying that, Brandon. That's what I wanted when I decided to do what I'm doing 7-8 years ago. That was my goal, to put myself in a position to have a voice and a platform and be at least somewhat salient in my message, so that people would listen, people would take it into account, and maybe we can get something started. You know, I wish I would have started this 20 years ago, because, you know, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this, but you know, I'm going to do it as long as I can anyway, for sure.
So what if you don't mind me asking one last question? I am curious to know what's on the docket for goals of yours and NAMI's for 2023.
Well, so as you may know, prior to Chuck getting involved as the president 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago, NAMI Wilmington was pretty much a dormant organization. And I've talked to a lot of providers who tell me, you know, in the area, who tell me, oh, NAMI Wilmington used to be, you know, really vibrant, really vital, active, lots of programs and so on. And then it kind of went away. So the first step, to answer your question, the first step is to kind of get us back to where we're providing the basic nuts and bolts of what NAMI does, which is family to family program, other peer support programs. We're doing one at the university called Youngish. So we want young people to attend this. We're actually putting it on campus, and Chuck is developing 3 or 4 other different support groups that we're going to be trying to partner with the county and Novant in terms of getting some funding to do more and more support groups in the providers spaces. So we take it to where the people who need the peer support are, rather than having them come to us. So that's the first wave of initiatives which Chuck is working on, and I'm just there to support him and help him, you know, any way I can. And then beyond that, I would like to have us start partnering with the university and have NAMI be kind of leading into the leading force that kind of helps inform and kind of have the university kind of reimagining their relationship with students and mental health, and kind of see if we can get UNCW to be a leader in developing a more robust student mental health programs and support and so on, that's a huge challenge because it goes into state funding and all that. So this is sort of a big picture idea that I have of bridging NAMI Wilmington and the university together to be a real force for family support for individuals in the community, and then kind of build from there through the UNC system, because we have NAMI affiliates throughout the state, and every place that there's a university or a member of the UNC system, there's also a NAMI affiliate. So that's kind of does that kind of paint a little bit of a picture for you, kind of where I'm trying to head this thing?
Yeah.
You know, it's cool, but I don't know what the challenges are. I know there's going to be resistance from financially. There's probably going to be resistance legislatively. I just don't know where the roadblocks and hurdles are going to be, but I'm sure they're going to be there. But, you know, it's a great message. I think improving environment and fostering mental health for the individuals and for their families. I mean, what could be a better objective, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
All of this will help reduce the stigma too, I think. So
yeah,
definitely. Okay, so I did want to swing back to something we were talking about much earlier in relation to your son and the mention of the program you felt, the transitional program you felt ended up working best for him. What do you feel, if you can even recall, what do you feel worked well for your son about that program? Or what if he knew what worked for him personally? What do you what aspects do you think worked for him, or is that a tough question?
Yeah, so there's, as you well know, and I have to remind everybody that I have absolutely no clinical experience or knowledge. So this is all based on my experience as a parent, right? So I felt like he needed to have some place where he could be taken care of, because he couldn't manage living day to day as a psychotic, having constant psychotic episodes as a schizophrenic. He couldn't remember anything. He didn't know how to manage his day-to-day routine, and all those problems that come along with that kind of a very serious mental illness. So he needed to get into a place where he was taken care of. So that's the first thing. So Madden was able to provide him with a therapist, with meds that were very helpful. He started with Haldol, and I can't think of the other one at that time that was really pretty experimental. And it did help him. It did calm him. It did give him the ability to think more clearly and actually communicate. So that was the first step, and having a place to live, where I couldn't have him living in my house. I didn't have room for him. Plus, we were worried about, we had 2 little kids, and that just wasn't going to work. So he had a place to live, food. They helped him get his SSA and all that. So that's all the fundamental stuff that I know you guys provide. But then once he was stabilized, he still was not healthy. He still had a heavy drug regimen, and he would go off of that. Time to time, he would smoke pot. I think one of the questions you were going to ask about other substance problems. Well, he smoked pot, he drank beer. He didn't get healthy until he was ultimately convinced that he shouldn't do that. And that's what the real help, and this is the answer to your question, is you get the fundamental, the needs taken care of having a place to sleep, somebody to kind of take care of you on a day-to-day basis, or watch out for you, provide food, and so on, the fundamentals. But then how do you get from that place to where you can actually navigate and live in society? So he actually, when you read the book, you see that he was actually into 3 different systems. The third system was where he met his therapist. And to me, it came down with Doug, at least. He didn't have the ability to really achieve a functional lifestyle until he met the therapist that convinced him to stop smoking pot, to stop drinking beer, and to focus on his emotions, to focus on the things he needed to focus on to be able to communicate with people effectively, to be introspective, and all those things. That didn't happen until like 6 years into his treatment. Okay. All the rest of the time, he was just stable. And you need stability, but you also need, I think, almost everybody that I've talked to who really feels like they're in recovery, they can attribute it to having a relationship with a therapist that they really believe in. And that person was so odd, because at the time Doug died, he had been with her about a year as a therapist. They were the same age, but he considered her like the woman in his life who he could trust. He didn't have the trust in his mother and other women in his life. And it's a fascinating dimension to his recovery, that it wasn't until he met her that he felt like, okay, I can trust this person. What she's telling me, I should listen to. I should follow her advice. And when he did that, he began to recover very quickly. And he went from being not doing very well to doing very well within the space of a year and a half after he met his therapist. And I chronicled that story very thoroughly in the book, because it's such an important aspect of his recovery, to have the relationship with her that he had. So
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Does that help a little?
It does. It does. We're grateful for that therapist.
Yeah.
Those are.
Yeah. And that's a real crapshoot. How do you find, I have students talking all the time about, in this course I'm talking about, where they're sharing their experiences with therapists and so on, that they have such a hard time finding that person that, that they can trust and have confidence in. And one of the things I found is, in talking to therapists, is it's such a difficult job to deal with these challenged people day in and day out, that it wears them out, that they get, they just get, tired. They can't keep doing it. And so sometimes, and Stacy Collimer in social work says, this is a real problem, to having them have the staying power to just keep doing that job, because it's so challenging. And it can be frustrating. It can be painful for them emotionally. So that's another problem. How do we get therapists who can keep doing that job when it's so difficult? I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for us. It has been an absolute pleasure having you, Douglas.
Amazing.
Brandon, thank you for hosting. I hope we get to do this again soon. I feel like we could really talk for several hours.
Absolutely.
I would love to do this again, you guys. I've really enjoyed it, and it's a great forum for me to spew all my ideas, so I appreciate it.
I think we just found our first recurring guest, so that's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, I'll definitely come back whenever you want me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Transition Points. We will see you guys around. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Doug.
Bye. Thank you.